On this episode of Doing the Most, the state of cider in America. These are my top 10 takeaways after attending CiderCon, and several of them are relevant to you. Please excuse the casual environment I'm recording in. I just mixed up my ciders that I was excited to make after going to CiderCon, and I felt like today was a good time to sit down at my dining room table and talk to you about the things I learned at CiderCon and the things that I learned from CiderCon, like my takeaways. I promise this is going to be worth your while. So let's jump in. Number one, apple blends are super important. These sizers that I have here are made with apple juice and honey, both wildflower and orange blossom honey. And the apple juice is, in some parts, store-bought apple juice. In other parts, I acquired some fancy juice, both crabapple and golden russet juice from an orchard. And that makes up a small percentage of the apple juice, but it should provide overall a nice effect that kind of ties everything together. This is a thing I learned at CiderCon. I knew that there were folks blending apples to get interesting things out of their cider. What I didn't know was just how much science was going into that, because they're not just kind of selecting what's out in the orchard and trying to find something that works, but they're balancing acids and tannins and different types of tannin structures depending on the type of fruit. And so it can get really complicated, but in the cider share we went to, we were able to try dozens, if not hundreds, of ciders, and all of them listed what kinds of apples were in there. And the apple blend really makes a huge difference in what cider you get from the other side of things. And even ciders that taste very similar, with just a small tweak to how much of one or another apple was in there, you could still get something that felt very different. So when you're making cider, don't always just run down to the grocery store and grab some apple juice. Consider going to an orchard or a small family-owned grocery store and picking up some juice that'll give you something just a little bit different that you can use to compare in your mental map of apple juices to the regular store-bought, whatever this is, Macintosh apple juice. Number two, wild ferments are sometimes crucial terroir. If you haven't heard the word terroir, a lot of times it's used in the context of like soil conditions, the stuff that came out of the earth and into the fruit that you can then taste in your fermented product. And one of my friends who's a wine professional likes to describe terroir as a snapshot of a moment in time. Wild ferments are part of that snapshot. It's a snapshot of soil conditions, of weather conditions, of what the apples tasted like, and of the microbial colony on the apple. We had at CiderCon several wild fermented ciders, and while some were a little iffy, there were some that really expressed themselves in a way that I think just a regular yeast pitch of champagne or cider yeast would not have accomplished. And so I'm not telling you to go out and wild ferment your cider or your sizers, but what I am saying is I think there can be some benefit or some kind of structural advantage to experiencing the cider as it came to you from the farmer and from the field. And I think that can be fun under the right circumstances. Number three, long skin contact means less tannin. I mentioned this in the CiderCon video, and there were some people questioning that, but this came from a CiderCon session on tannin, where every panelist agreed that the longer your cider experiences contact with the solids of the apple, the more of that tannin polymerizes and adheres itself to those solids. So when the cider comes away from the solids, it has less tannin than if you had just pressed it and put it into the fermenter. I know this sounds counterintuitive, that longer skin contact would mean less tannin, but every person on this panel swore by it, that if you want more tannin in your cider, press that juice, get it fermenting, throw out the solids. I know, that's what they said. Number four, there is a huge textural difference between hard and soft tannin. So I'm not going to get too into the weeds scientifically on the differences between hard and soft tannins, but It boils down to the length of the chain of molecules, and they are experienced differently. Hard tannins are sharp and bitter and gritty and woody at times, whereas soft tannins are kind of mouth coating and gentle and textural, pulpy in a way. And, I had always known that there were kind of differences between hard and soft tannin, and a lot of times you're going to want to balance the two together. But tasting vastly different tannins across very similar ciders gave me a new appreciation for the slight nuance that you can dial in by getting the percentage of hard to soft tannins just right. Super interesting. These all have FT Blanc Soft, which is a gallnut tannin. That should give them a nice soft tannin profile. So they're a little bit pulpy, a little bit of a gentle tannin, but also it's supposed to provide just a little sense of sweetness. Number 5, cider yeast innovation is in full swing. You can see that demonstrated here. Fermentis has some new cider yeasts. They've got a whole booklet explaining the differences between the yeasts, and fortunately at CiderCon, they gave out samples of all of their cider yeasts, so I get to bring them home and play with them. Scott Labs was also there talking about cider yeast specifically, and they have a whole cider making handbook now that you can go on their website and download. I was lucky to get my own copy. Years ago, cider yeast was just wine yeast or ale yeast that had been repackaged and labeled as cider yeast, and there was some advantage to using it because it was yeast that was selected to do fun things with apple juice. But now they're really selecting yeasts specific to apple profiles and in what you're going to get on the other end of fermentation. Some might add extra sense of sweetness, some might be a cleaner fermenter. The yeast are literally evolving and branching out and becoming specialized in the different things they do in fermentation. And I think that's really cool. And while 3 years ago I might have told you don't worry about getting a cider yeast for your cider or sizer, my opinion on that has now changed as I have seen the innovation happening in the field. Cider yeasts are now becoming actual cider yeasts, and I think that's pretty cool. Number 6, I like cider more than beer. I said it. I enjoy a good beer. I mow the lawn. I like to drink a beer afterward, but I have really come full circle on cider in a way that I had not expected. And it's been a year and a half journey through cider, getting away from the Angry Orchards and the Strongbows of the world and really trying to get to know apples and styles. And there's just something really nice about a good, clean cider. Don't at me. Number 7, the cider industry is not embracing homebrewers. Yet. Now I say yet because I am going to be taking it on as a little bit of my own personal mission to advocate for more homebrewer representation in the cider industry. And to that effect, I have joined the American Cider Association, so I'm now a member. So now I have a voice, but small voice, but I have a voice in advocating for home cider makers, and I would encourage you to look at joining too. They have a pretty inexpensive deal for 1-year memberships, and I don't get anything from this. I'm literally just saying for $75 as a home cider maker, you can join the ACA, and they have a lot of resources to share around cider. But at CiderCon, Jake said it in my last CiderCon video, there just wasn't a lot for home cider makers there. And I think that's really a shame. I think if there was a nice low-cost entry point to CiderCon for home cider makers, and there was stuff both in the panels and sessions and in the vendor hall that was catered toward home cider makers, that they would actually see a boost to the industry because they are embracing people who have an interest in this that could go on to become cider makers or orchard owners in the future. Maybe I'll run for ACA president. Number 8, the industry is trending younger. This really fascinated me. Now, I went to CiderCon last year and it got blizzarded out, so I didn't get a good representation of the event. But this year, it was full of young people. This place was packed with people my age and younger, and I'm almost 40. I'm still young. Yeah, I'm still young. Yeah. The industry, though, is trending younger. Both the people behind the booths, the people in the sessions, people asking questions as orchard operators or cider makers, all trending younger. And then when you talk to the folks over at the ACA table or even just around the vendor hall, they say, wow, I can't believe how many young people are here. And I think it's really interesting to see my generation, as well as Gen Z, coming in and embracing cider. I think it probably has to do with some of the farm to table kind of element. It is a lot simpler. Even though there's more kind of specialized gear involved, it's a lot simpler, I think, to get into cider making, even on a grander scale than it is to get into beer making or mead or wine making. And so I can see why, but I still think it's cool to see. And I hope that bodes well for cider as its own thing. Like, I hope that someday when you go to the grocery store, there's not just a beer and wine section, but you got a big old cider section in there too. Number 9, CiderCon is way better when traveling with friends. This is just like a little bit of a love letter to Jake and Mandy for coming along with me on this crazy trip up to Chicago. It was freezing cold, and our hotel was a 6-minute walk away, and so there's a lot of hoofing it back and forth. There's a lot of navigating. There was a lot of downtime in the evenings, but we had a great time just hanging out, sharing drinks. And again, I landed in a blizzard last year at CiderCon, so I didn't get a great representative experience, but it was really boring. I had one friend, a guy from the Discord, that showed up, and so that was nice. But for the most part, I was traveling alone, I was hanging out alone, I was drinking alone, and that's kind of depressing. And so an event like this, where you are steeped in the industry, and there's friends everywhere, right? But it's still nice to have like your gaggle, your coven to hang out with. And so thank you, Jake and Mandy, for coming with me. And lastly, number 10, tannin and acid, balanced by fruit rather than adjuncts, are more satisfying. That's a mouthful, right? So one of the things we learned from the tannin session was that using fruits known for their tannin profiles to balance your cider is an art form that is very gratifying. And you can use tannin like FT Blanc Soft or chestnut tannin, wine tannin, oak powder, whatever. You can add tannins and you can kind of get there with tannins. But I could tell from the cider makers that they were all very self-satisfied about their ability to blend apples and nail that tannin profile that they want, so they get the mouthfeel and the finish that they're looking for out of their cider. And you know me, I love adding little magic powders to all my stuff to make it great, but I am inspired, at least in the cider realm, to really explore the breadth of apples, from bittersweet to bitter sharp to dessert apples, to really try and figure out how to make my own blends and nail it in the fermenter, so I'm not having to do any balancing on the other end. And I think that's a thing that may take me another 10 years, 15 years of home brewing to really figure out. And I've been at this hobby since 2010, and I am always astounded that I can find something new to explore. And it's nice to find a new journey to go on. I hope you enjoyed this video. You know where to find me. You know where the Discord is. You know how to like, comment, subscribe, all of that. Do you want more cider content here on the channel? Let me know about that also. I am very thankful to the American Cider Association for letting us come out to CiderCon and shoot a bunch of content and learn a bunch about cider. I'm excited to be an ACA official member, so I can come to you boop, 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 reporting live as an ACA member on what's going on in the industry. I hope you'll join too. And until next time, happy brewing, happy cider making, and cheers.
Homemade brews and various how-tos, everything from mead to roast, bake creation, fermentation, inebriation, doing the most.